Welcome back, y'all. This is the Bluechip Breakdown, and I'm your host, Bull. Happy Sunday to everybody. In today's video, of course, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts after staying up all night watching our Vols beat up on Kent State. I also rewatched Oklahoma versus Tulane. I'll be giving you my thoughts on Oklahoma and just, starting to break down that matchup. As always, y'all, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I will be working all day long on film breakdowns. We're going to have those out starting tomorrow for the members of this channel. And if y'all would like to see that, or if you just want to support this channel, keep us growing, please do consider becoming a member by clicking on the join button below this video. And it was a really good weekend for Cash App donations. If you would like to support us, keep us growing, another way to do that is by scanning the Cash App QR code wherever it is on the screen. You can donate as little as $1. We appreciate every single penny. Y'all are awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of the support that we've been getting. Let's go ahead and jump into the video. All right, y'all, we'll be starting off, of course, with our game versus Kent State. We won at 71-0. We really beat down on those guys. I think we had 65 points in the first half, which is great. Also, we're breaking records for points, breaking records for yards, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't the best game. I feel like there was some things that we kind of like left out there. But at the same time, you have to be proud of the way that we came out, took care of business. We got up for this game, which is tough to do because we knew that we're going to blow Kent State out. But I'm just proud of the way that we handled this like a very mature, veteran-led team. So I think that that's a good sign for us moving forward. Now, we're not going to, talk about every single player, especially in that second half, several underclassmen, a lot of backups. We got deep into our roster. I don't think it's necessary for us to talk about those players as much in this video, but we will touch on some of them. Mostly, I just want to focus on the players that will be actually contributing for us throughout the rest of the season. We will start off on offense. Let's talk about Nico. He went 10 for 16, which is about 62%. That's not great. He averaged about 11 yards per completed pass. Also, he had one touchdown. You can see his QBR, 85.2. That's not great by any means. He didn't play as clean as he could have. Definitely missed some throws, but at the same time, there were some drops from the wide receivers. We'll get to them here in just a second. And in the post-game live stream that we did last night, I talked some about the offensive line. Yeah, it was makeshift for a major portion of the time that Nico was out there. I disagree with putting him out there with guys that aren't, the true starters. Lance Hurd did not go in this game. But I would say outside of that, we had all of our starters in, and they looked good. I'm going to tell you right here, right now, just talking about that offensive line, Andre Carrick is turning into one of the most consistent and one of the most dominant players on that front. That's it's not really a huge surprise, but it is it's kind of a shocker to me that he's playing as well as he has been. He has just looked consistently dominant, whether he's working in combo blocks or if he's just getting guys on his own. He is a bully, and I'm very, very proud of the way that he's playing now, just sticking with that left guard. I think that Jackson Lampley struggled some. He also looked dominant some, but it's versus Kent State. So he shouldn't be struggling versus those guys. He had one really bad holding, call. But, he needed to hold because you don't want for Nico to get hit. And he kind of got beat off of the snap. So he's got some strides to kind of, take moving forward. And then Sham, I think while he was in, he played well. I don't know what's going on with him. Hopefully he's going to be okay. But, man, we saw so many really nice combo blocks where we're just driving bodies. And I think that, Dane Davis, I think that he played well at left tackle for the most part. He still needs to kind of make those strides. He's a better right tackle than he is at left. I think that John Campbell played great. So we looked very solid, I would say, with the offensive line that was out there, especially in the first and I want to say maybe second series. Outside of that, guys like Larry Johnson, he didn't look great. He definitely needs to improve. Who else could I kind of point to here? That's pretty much it, just as far as who played with our starters. I think that we looked pretty solid. I would give them about a B+ overall. Going back to Nico, I'd give him like a solid B-. You know what I mean? He, again, some of those, passes that were not completed was due to some drops. The ball wasn't always in the best spot, but he did have some throws, man, like the one to Chaz Nimrod earlier in that game. That window that he fit that ball into, that was beautiful. So I'm proud of him for that. You can still tell that he's got all the, proper skills necessary. Let's see what he did as a rusher. He had 5 carries for 31 yards, 6.2 yards per carry. He's got to protect himself a little bit more. On one of those plays, it was a third down. I know he was trying to get that first down, but he could not quite get there. And you just got to understand the, totality of the situation that you're in. We're playing up against Kent State. We don't need you sacrificing your body versus those guys. We got to, if you are going to do it, you do it in SEC play. And even then, it's such a long season, man. Just kind of like, take what's there and don't work too hard to, put your body at risk. If you can make people miss, make a miss, but then get your butt down unless you can score. So there's still some, things that he needs to do just to grow. Also, man, on that one play where he's trying to get into the end zone, comes up short. He kind of turns his body. You don't really want to expose, your rib cage and all that type of stuff on plays like that. Now he probably does have maybe like a rib protector in, but just don't risk those types of things anymore, Nico. So I would give him a B minus overall. Now let's come on down to our rushing numbers right here. All right, so number one, I think that, man, D Sam is a dog. He had a great game. You can see his numbers right here: 13 carries, 101 yards, 7.8 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. We learned last night that he's on pace to break the touchdown rushing record for our Volunteers. I think that Travis Stevens holds that record. I thought that it was Travis Henry, but whoever it is, he's on pace to break that record. I don't know how many he has on the season, but he's got to be close to double digits. And I would expect that with a longer season, he should be able to get somewhere around 20 or so touchdowns. That's going to be really big for us to go out and, get some prospects, some blue chip running back prospects that will just understand, hey, look, you can ball out inside of our system. Also, I think that what we really learned from the offense as a whole, with the starters, is that Deshaun Bishop is probably going to be running back number 2, at least earlier in the season. Now we'll see what happens once Cam Selden does come back. Can he kind of take some strides? He's going to have to, because I'm not 100% sold on who that third running back will be. We need to find one. That's going to be absolutely necessary as we're getting into conference play. But super proud of what Bishop did, man. 7 carries, 120 yards, 17.1 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. Beautiful game by him. I also think that Peyton Lewis, look at that, 10 carries for 99 yards. Finally seeing him kind of, finding those creases. Still needs to work on his vision, but he played well. 9.9 yards per carry. And then also, Hunter Barnes coming in, he's probably not going to play that much for us this season. I think that he looked really, really good. He's running hard. He's running to that green grass. I think that Patrick Will also looked good, just kind of, running, behind his pads, things like that. And then Khalifa Keith, 4 carries for 13 yards, 3.3 yards per carry. He needs to continue to kind of work on his vision. He is going to be more of that downhill power running back. Probably going to be expecting him to, kind of run through contact, which I think that he's done a nice job with. So all in all, I love what our running backs did. I would give them a solid, I'm going to go A plus, especially if you're talking about this, our real starters, guys who are really going to be playing. I'm going to give them an A plus for the way that they followed their blocks, fell forward, all of that good stuff. I think that they had a really, really nice day. Also, they looked good just in pass protection where they didn't have to help where they didn't have to help out as much. But they were right there. I think that they understood where to go. So that's huge. Now let's come on down to the wide receivers. I think that we had a really nice day from the wide receivers. It wasn't, we didn't utilize them as much down the field as I thought that we would. Now, Kent State ran cover 4. We talked about that some yesterday as well. Cover 4 is a deeper coverage, but also it's more of a one-on-one deep coverage. So it can turn into man. And I don't know how to really like explain it to you outside of saying that you can still go vertical on a cover 4. Whereas some of these other coverages that is a, really true, hey, this is a zone coverage and it's not going to necessarily change. In those coverages, it's a little bit harder to force the ball down the field. Kent State didn't drop 8 as much. It was more of a, drop 6, drop 5 type of a look. So we had the opportunities to go deep on them. And I mean, we did take advantage of it sometimes, but we probably didn't really want to run it up as much versus Kent State. So that's part of the reason I think that we didn't stretch the field vertically. But man, look at this right here. Dante Thornton is still playing well. I love the fact that he's able to catch some of these, like intermediate passes. He looks strong right there, making those catches. So that's going to be big. Will he continue to do that versus SEC competition? We're going to need for him to do that. He's got to make those tough catches. So proud of him right there. Also, Brazel finally finds that end zone. That was a beautiful ball that Nico threw to him. I mean, that was beautiful. It was perfect. He dropped it right in there, and Brazel did not have to break stride. So I think he's going to be a problem for sure for us moving forward. Mike Matthews coming in, his first game playing, where there's as a true freshman just period, right? I mean, he looked really, really good. I think that every single play that he had in my mind was just explosive. You're seeing him catching some of those quick screens, getting up the field, kind of finding that green grass, fighting through tackles, falling forward. And then his catch in the end zone from Gaston Moore, that was a thing of beauty. Going up, high pointing the football. You can see how good of an athlete he is and then how much of a dog he is to make that catch, bring it in, and it looked effortless. So he will also contribute a lot for our Volunteers moving forward. Who else do we have right here? I think the Chaz Nimrod looked pretty good. he's got to get a little bit stronger at the point of contact. He's up to 220 pounds. He shouldn't be coming up to block guys and getting pushed back by any means. He's got to work on his mindset some. I want for him to, be very close with Brew, and I need for some of that Brew to kind of rub off on him. Be more of a bully because you are a bigger body. We need for him to be doing those types of things. I think that he looked good though, just kind of fighting for those extra yards, things like that. Caleb Webb, same thing. He looked good. I think the Squirrel White, he looked good. It didn't get very many opportunities. He might have had actually 3 passes thrown to him, so maybe 3 targets with only 1 catch. The first one that was thrown to him, well, it might have been a little bit behind him, but you got to make those catches, Squirrel. And he already knows that. I mean, he's going out there, trying to make it look good and all that. Just make the catch. Okay, we need for y'all to be consistent in making these catches because, again, we're getting into SEC play now. It's going to be very, very critical. So, that's pretty much it. We can see that our running backs got a few catches out of the backfield. That's huge. Those were on some kind of like bubble screen types of deals, right? Like the running back just kind of flow on out to the flats, catch the ball. They've got some blockers right there. So we're showing some different looks where we can utilize our running backs out of the backfield. I love to see that. But all in all, I would give the wide receivers by themselves, I'd give them a solid A. I think that they played well. No, I'm gonna say A minus because there were several drops. And actually, I'm gonna take that all the way down to a B plus. I think that we might have had 4 drops. That's really unacceptable. I mean, maybe 1 drop per game, but not as many as we had. So I'm going to give them a B plus. Still some things for us to work on right there. Now, let's move on down to the defense. We can see that Edris Farouk was our leading tackler, and he played a whole lot more than our starters did. We won't talk too much about all these numbers individually. The one thing that I will kind of point to as we, are going to be talking about our D-line, that front four, y'all notice right here as we come all the way down here to the bottom, we had 0 sacks in this game. That's a little bit concerning for me. And just to kind of double back, we did give up 1 sack to Kent State. I think that was in some mop-up duty stuff. Either way, I mean, we've got to find some ways to get to the quarterback. Now, we did get held a few times, but I mean, we shouldn't, be allowing for teams like Kent State to hold us and prevent us from getting to the quarterback. So not quite sure why we didn't get there. We had opportunities for sure. So we have to continue to work on. Of course, we're kind of basic with our pass rush, with our blitzes. Didn't put too much out there on film, as we talked about before. We are being very intentional with what we put out on film because we have Oklahoma coming up this weekend. Either way, I think that all in all, our front four did play well, just in kind of, getting into their, running lanes, passing lanes, or I'm sorry, rushing lanes, things like that. Wasn't a horrible day, especially, for our starters, for our guys. A couple of things that I really liked was with Jackson Moore. We talked about him kind of getting washed down, kind of getting double teamed and moved around some last weekend versus NC State. Didn't see that versus Kent State at all. I think that he did a lot better at the point of contact. Still seeing a whole lot of effort from that front four. So I would say all in all, y'all, I would give them about an A minus. There is some things that they could have improved on. It wasn't their absolute best showing, but they did play well. They did play hard. And you're not going to play perfect every single week. So on to that second level with our linebackers. I love what I'm seeing from them. Keenan Pili is a stud. Let's see how many tackles he had. It looks like he had 3 tackles and he had 1 solo tackle. Of course, he had that 1 tackle for loss. That's something else. Just kind of talking about with our front four. They were so disruptive with that center that he had several terrible snaps. That's not just because he couldn't snap. It's because he's worried about, man, I got to block these big old dudes, these big old fast dudes. So that is a good look from our front as well. But yeah, I think that our linebackers played well. This weekend coming up is going to be huge for them because Oklahoma likes to work the middle of the field. I think that their tight ends are going to be a big part of their game plan this weekend. So linebackers are going to have to play well. But I think that we did a really nice job of getting off blocks, whether we're beating it with speed, beating it with strength, whatever it is, just kind of, scraping over, scraping under. We did what we had to do, got into our run fits very well. I love what I saw from AC. He played great. Excuse me. I think that JT also played really, really nice. Jalen Smith, he looked good. Caleb Perry, he's got to continue to work and grind and, fight. Maybe he was a little bit discouraged because he wasn't out there earlier. But man, if you sit out 1 week for whatever reason, you know that we got plenty of depth. So you're going to have to work yourself back into it. So hopefully he kind of stays engaged. I don't think that that's going to be a major problem for him. But I did see a little bit more of the old Caleb Perry from the previous seasons where he's not playing with as much fight. Could be because, hey, we're playing up against Kent State, but we need for you to bring that funk every single weekend. But outside of that, I think that Edwin Spillman still, he's still learning. Obviously, he's growing. That's his first game. starting or not starting. That's his first game playing. So, he has some things that he needs to work on, but I did see some things that I like. So him kind of, fighting and beating some blocks and really, hitting hard at the point of contact. So I feel like our linebacking core is looking good. All in all, I would say just talking about mostly, the guys who we do expect to play this season, I would give it about an A minus. Again, just because I think that Edwin Spillman is a guy who will end up playing at some point this year. He still has some things to kind of work on. Some of the other guys, it definitely wasn't perfect, but it did look good. So I'm going to go with an A minus for that group. Now, as we, just kind of talk about the secondary, I'll keep on scrolling through here so that, we can pay attention to some of these numbers. But with the secondary, man, we'll start with our star players. I think that Boo Carter played well, looked a lot better tackling. He had one very, very solid tackle. It was for a loss of like 15, 20 yards, whatever that was. So he's looking better, in that aspect. Also, Christian Harrison continues to look really good. I think that our cornerbacks played well. We got to kind of get off blocks a little bit better. We didn't do as good of a job this weekend as we did last weekend. So, that's something for us to continue to work on. We're going to have to do that versus Oklahoma. They do a whole lot of blocking, getting the ball out quick to guys. So it's going to be huge for those guys, for the corners, for the star players to get off blocks, come up and make good sound fundamental tackles. So I would give our star group about an A in this game. I would give our cornerbacks about an A. Looked good down the field in coverage for the most part, especially with our two starters. Now, as you kind of got a little bit deeper into things, Jordan Matthews, he didn't look great in coverage. He gave up a couple of inside routes on some hitches, things like that, or slants, whatever that was. And I mean, listen, that's something that it's okay for him, especially because typically for him, he's been giving up those deep passes a little bit too often. So I would rather him be able to come up and make some plays, but he's going to have to start coming up and making those plays. Get the football out, whatever you have to do. But he was a pretty sure tackler once he did get there. So I would give our cornerbacks as a whole about an A minus. You know what I mean? I don't want to be too critical because I think that, we played within our scheme very well. So, that is pretty much it, obviously, outside of the safeties. And I think that they looked great, coming down, filling, run support, man, like their run fits, all that type of stuff. They looked really, really good. They're really solid. I'm talking about Turntine. I'm talking about Brooks, and I'm talking about Thomas. And obviously, you go back up. Edge Reese, man, he's looking really good. I think that he's a player that I would definitely wouldn't say that we feel like we can trust him at this point. He's still growing, but at some point in the season, we will feel like we can trust him. And, he's probably going to get some reps and not as much of mop-up duty. We're going to test him. We're going to see in a game where maybe we're up big but playing against somebody good. We're going to see, hey, how do you handle this SEC player, right? So I think that his time is definitely coming. I think that John Slaughter also looked good. And, we look good in pass coverage as well. They weren't really getting tested or challenged, but they will see those tests and those challenges at some point next weekend. I think that they will hold up. So as a group, I would give them a very, very solid A. And also, for those of y'all wondering, Kobe Thomas had to sit out, I believe, for the second half of our game versus Kent State. Would expect for him to be back full go versus Oklahoma. And let's go ahead and take a look at Oklahoma versus Tulane. Oklahoma wins this one, as y'all can see, 34-19. The game was within about a touchdown late in that fourth quarter. I think the Oklahoma's depth just kind of wore them down right there towards the end. We're going to focus right here first on Jackson Arnold's numbers. He went 18 for 29, which is 62%. That's the same as Nico's was last night. Obviously, Tulane is a much better, or, they're much better competition than Kent State was. And Jackson Arnold also had 169 yards passing. That's good for 5.8 yards per catch. And also one touchdown. He had one pick six. So I think that he looked a little bit more confident than he has in some of these previous games, but it still isn't great. Of course, this guy is a redshirt freshman. He's still learning. He's still growing. Some of that definitely, especially towards the end of the game, was due to Oklahoma's offensive line, I think, kind of getting tired because their O-line started to gel towards, like in the start of that game. They actually looked pretty solid. It wasn't great by any means. Still some things that I feel like they need to get cleaned up. But, really towards the end of the game, as they started to get tired because they do lack depth up front. You saw that that Tulane was able to find some success getting after Jackson Arnold and kind of stuffing Oklahoma's running game. So I would expect that in this game coming up this weekend, that's probably going to be a point of emphasis. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit more here in just a second. But also, if you look at Jackson Arnold's rushing numbers down here, he had 14 carries, which is tied for the most out of all of their rushers in this game yesterday. He had 97 yards, which is the most amount of rushing yards out of all of their backs. And he had 6.9 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Now, he does not mind running between those tackles. I think that could be a mistake versus our Vols. Let's talk about the rest of their running backs. Yeah, you can see that Barnes had 14 carries for 53 yards, good for only 3.8 yards per attempt. And then Taylor Tatum had he had 9 rushes for 27 yards, only 3 yards per carry. Gavin Sawchuk only, averaging 2.7 yards per carry. So they had 182 yards total on the ground. I think that that's pretty solid. But again, whenever you look at most of those yards came from Jackson Arnold, they're still struggling to run the football. I know that that will probably be a point of emphasis for them versus our Volunteers. Now let's come on down here and let's talk a little bit about their wide receivers. There's nothing here that necessarily wows you. This guy right here, Deion Burks, he is explosive. They like to get him the ball, kind of close to that line of scrimmage and let him go to work. Wasn't too much of a vertical threat. Hasn't been too much of a vertical threat this entire season. We'll see where they open things up, where they try to push the ball down the field. It's all going to depend on, do they feel like their offensive line can hold up? And I don't think necessarily that they will be able to versus our front, especially whenever we're not playing as basic. We're going to dial up some blitzes, things like that. We know what they like to do. And then right here, Bauer Sharp, I believe that is one of their tight ends. He had a pretty solid day. They're going to use their tight ends as much as possible. And then you can see just not a whole lot of production from their wide receivers as a whole. So as we just kind of talk about their offense, from top to bottom, I would say that, again, offensive line is still a problem. I think that, it's gotten a little bit better up to this point in the season. I think that they've made a few strides, but, we'll see how they can match up versus our Vols. I would probably give the edge right now to our Volunteers. And then also just kind of talking about their backs, I think that they run hard, but again, man, with that offensive line not opening up too many holes, it's going to be difficult, I think, for them to have success running the ball versus our front. Our linebackers are going to be so critical in this game. They're going to have to come up and make sure that they're fitting runs. Now, what I've noticed from Oklahoma is they've started to run some of the plays that Tennessee has run. I mean, literally the exact same plays. So, they like to do some of that, some of that pulling tackles, pulling tight ends, things like that, using them as lead blockers in some power runs. And I think that they had some success with that. They actually look a whole lot better doing that than they have with the inside zone game. They also look pretty good in the outside zone game, some of those stretch plays. That's why the linebackers are going to be so critical, because on plays like that where they're stretching it, or it's an outside zone, our linebackers have to be there to fill those gaps, because the running backs will be looking for some cutbacks. So it's going to be critical for our linebackers to fill and make sure that we're very sound fundamentally tackling. I don't think that that's going to be a problem. We've seen that every single week this entire season, and we've gotten better and better at it. So we'll see what happens there. But pretty much, man, outside of that, I love how our secondary matches up versus their wide receivers. I think that they're down maybe 3 of their top 4 wide receivers. Again, Burke is going to be one of their best guys, but their wide receivers are kind of smaller. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily scrappy. They do a good job blocking on the outside, but it's not a great job. We should be able to get off of those blocks. And it's just not a whole lot there that concerns you. They do a lot of, trying to throw the ball to the middle of the field on some hitches. I know that they want to try to work some slants in there. That's where they can kind of hit those home runs at. But, I think that we're going to be just fine. The star position is also going to be very, very critical. Tight ends are going to be probably a bigger part of their offense coming up this weekend. But it's just not a lot that scares you. They will try to hide those tight ends, kind of start them off blocking and sneak them out. So we just got to be disciplined. But I think that our safeties, linebackers definitely will be very disciplined. We'll see what happens with the star position. But, again, I feel like we match up very well with their wide receivers on the outside. We'll see if they can get some of their guys back. Are they bigger? Will they play some of their bigger guys? Because they do have some big ones. That could maybe pose a little bit more of a threat, because our cornerbacks are big, 6'1", 6'2". They're long, they're fast, they're physical. So I just think that the best thing for Oklahoma to try to do in this game would be to utilize some of their bigger guys they've had hiding on that bench. Now let's come on down to their defense. And as y'all can see, man, Stutzman is still that dude. He's leading them in tackles, no question. He had 12 in this game. He's one that we're definitely going to have to identify. Where is he at on every single play? I think that he does a beautiful job just coming up, getting into his run fits, all that. He's one of the best probably in the whole country at that. But if you can get him out in space, which I have seen them use him as more of that will linebacker, where, like, let's just say if we kind of spread them out and we're running like quads, which is going to be 4 wide receivers, 2 on both sides. I've seen them just leave a Mike right in the middle of their defense, and they do run a 4-man front for the most part. And then they will have, whether it's 2 linebackers, 1 on the left side, 1 on the right side, or if it's just 1 linebacker that might be try to match or that might try to match up versus like a tight end or something on one side. And then they have their nickel player, which is, we call that our star lined up on the other side. The middle of their defense is going to be wide open. So whether it's Stutzman in there, whether it's someone else, I think that we could, use that, like gap scheme running, that power running where we're pulling guys over and just really get downhill and make those guys have to play out in space some more. I think that we could really, really have a field day versus their defense getting into some sets like that. And I know some of that, might be hard for some people to grasp, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. My whole thing is this: I feel like with their defense as a unit, they've got some guys starting up with their front four on the inside with those tackles. Those guys can disrupt just as far as pass rush. I think that they're solid. As far as stop and runs, things like that. So we'll see what our guards, what our center Cooper Mays can do to get some push on those guys. But I still feel like it's not, they're not world beaters. They are very good. Probably, going to be the best that we've seen so far, but they're still not on a crazy level as we've seen with some of these teams that we faced up against last season in the SEC. I think that their edges, the guys coming off of the ends with their front four, they've got a few guys like 32. I think they were actually running a 3-3-5 and they brought 32 up to the line of scrimmage to rush. He's got some good speed. That could pose some threats because our tackles don't do the best job versus speed on the outside. We'll see how that thing goes. But I still feel good about it just because he's a smaller guy. And I think that we do a good job if it's a much smaller player, getting our hands on him and just kind of stopping him. So maybe we can get a quicker pass set to the outside and then boom, be able to punch him and kind of stop him and then get our feet back right so that we can move them on, like wash them down to the inside if they, kind of stem to the outside, come back to the inside on a pass rush. But for the most part, y'all, their ends are more about that power rush. They're more about just maintaining pass lanes. And that's going to be a big point of emphasis for their defense versus our Vols coming up here very shortly this weekend. And as we kind of, look back, I would say that their cornerbacks, they look good for the most part, but they run some weird kind of funky zones. And I've seen them get out of place. I think that they're big for the most part. They're physical. They've got good length. And I also just feel like Nico will be able to fit the ball into some good windows versus those guys. I think that our bigger wide receivers will also be, bigger point of emphasis in this game for us, just because we will be able to win those one-on-one balls and things like that. But I think that the middle of their defense as a whole could be a place that we try to attack, whether it's with our tight ends or whether it's on some dig routes with our wide receivers, whatever that looks like. Also, I think that their nickel guys are okay. Like I said, their nickel is typically going to be a little bit more of a linebacker, so I feel like we should have some big time mismatches with Squirrel White playing in there. Now they do have some guys that are a little bit more like corners that they can throw in there. So, we'll see how the matchups look, all of that. We will have a very solid game plan for sure versus this defense. I just think that we can win in several areas. Also, as we talk about their safeties, I've said a whole lot of good things about them. They do play hard. They do play well, especially getting into their run fits coming down in run support. But I've seen them have a tendency to get confused on some of their coverages. I think that we will do that for sure in this game, like we saw back in 2022, a little bit in 2023, where we have people just running wide open. Expect to see some of that in this game because they have a tendency to bust in coverage. They also have a tendency to kind of, whiff on some tackles, things like that, as they're getting into their run fits. So all in all, y'all, I would say with this game, I feel very confident about the way that our Volunteers, could look very early on in this process. We'll just kind of continue to scroll through, the rest of some of their numbers, and we'll talk about what Tulane did on offense. Y'all can see 173 yards passing, they had 106 yards on the ground, 3.1 yards per carry. And let's see, they also had, looks like 3 sacks, so that should tell you a lot about Oklahoma's front. But Oklahoma's defense also had 3 sacks. So that's about, how that game looked from top to bottom. I just think that, this was a game that was tight. We figured that it would be tight. Oklahoma came out, played well to, kind of start the game off, but you could just tell that that depth started to wear down for Oklahoma. And that's another thing that I think will be a problem versus our Volunteers this weekend because we are deep at every single position. So that's it for this one, y'all. Please give me y'all's thoughts down in the comment section. As always, thank you for sticking all the way to the end. And please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other Volunteer fans. We'll see y'all in just a minute. Thanks. Peace.